So here we go. Hello, Tim.
I
How are you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
strange
okay. I'm
times.
okay.
Yeah. But warm welcome to a duet. I know you from Edinburgh. I've seen you around and I see your kids around and I've been to your house and your wonderful daughter made some Swedish lessons there. So I sort of really look forward to this because I'm inspired by a lot of the work that you do, Tim. You should just know that. So much further to do, I just say, Tim Porteus, tell a story.
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me on. I had a wee reflection this morning about what story to tell, and so I'm going to tell you a very well-known, quite short traditional tale that I heard many years ago, but I've heard told since. And this is my little twist on this tale. And it comes from a part of the world I love, which is the highlands of Scotland. And I can't go there just now. The lockdown means that I can only go there in my imagination. So stories are great for that because they transport you to places where they take place. And so in my imagination, the stories have kept me connected to the Highlands. And this is a story that takes place in the Crofting area of the west coast of Scotland by the coast itself. And there was a crofter whose name was Donald. Now, Donald loved Morag. He loved her very much. Morag kept Donald company and warm on cold nights. Morag was usually the only one who would listen to his problems and his thoughts. Morag was very important to him for lots of different reasons. Morag was Donald's cow. Now, in those days, of course, cows came into the house in the evening to stay warm. One day, Donald's cow, Morag, broke her tether, managed to get out of the field which she would normally be grazing in, and went for a wander. And as she wandered, unfortunately, she fell over a tall, steep cliff. Now, fortunately, the cliff overlooked the sea, and the sea, the tide was in. And so Morag, the cow, fell towards the sea. And fortunately, she could swim. Unfortunately, the very place where Morag landed in the sea was exactly where Callum, the fisherman, had moored his boat. And so Morag landed right in the middle of Callum's boat. This unfortunately meant that Morag was killed as she hit the boat. Uh, and when Donald discovered what had happened to Morag, he was at first extremely upset and sad that he'd lost this very important cow who had kept him company, who'd listened to all his problems and also supplied him with milk. And this grief then turned to anger because if it had not been for Callum's boat, Morag would still be alive. And so he blamed Callum for the death of his cow. So he went immediately to Callum's house and he banged on the door and he said to Callum, Morag is dead because of you. And Callum said, well, what are you talking about? And when Donald explained that Morag had wandered across the cliff and fallen down into Callum's boat, Callum was, what? And he ran out, and sure enough, on the shoreline there was poor Morag lying, and Callum's boat was wrecked, unusable. I mean, a cow had fallen into it, so obviously it wasn't going to be usable. And so Donald demanded from Callum that Callum pay him some compensation for his cow. He wanted another cow. And Callum said, absolutely no way. Your cow wrecked my boat. I want compensation from you. And the two men, of course, could not agree. And so they made a decision that they would go to the landlord, the laird, the chief, the wise man. And the chief would know whose fault it was and who should pay whom compensation. And so Donald and Callum went up to the chief, and they told the chief their story. And he listened to Donald and how the cow had fallen over the cliff, and he listened to Callum and how his boat was now wrecked and ruined, and how both men believed the other man was responsible for their ruin. But he couldn't make a decision. He wasn't sure what to say, so he decided that he would employ the wisest man in the clan to adjudicate, to decide who was at fault and who should pay whom. And that, of course, was the bard, the Svend-Erik, the storyteller. Well, what wiser person in the clan than the storyteller? And so the chief gave the storyteller the task, and he said to the storyteller, in front of everyone, your task is to find out who is at fault here, and whatever you decide, whatever my storyteller decides, I will enforce his decision, and that will be the end of the matter. So the storyteller starts his investigation. He goes and he talks to Donald, and Donald tells him what happened, and then he goes to Callum, and Callum tells his point of view, and then he examines the scene of the events. He goes to inspect poor Morag. She's definitely dead. And everybody knew that Morag could swim. Then he went to inspect Callum's boat. Definitely unusable. Right in the middle of the boat, there was this kind of cow-shaped hole right in the middle. And then he went to see where this whole incident took place, and he had a think. And he made his decision. So he went back to the chief, and Callum was there, and Donald was there, hoping that their point of view would be the one that would be the one upheld. And the story says, I've made my decision, I have done my investigation. He said, everyone knew Morag could swim. She wandered off the edge of the cliff into the sea. Now, it is clear that if Morag had fallen into the sea, she would have been able to swim back to the shore. But unfortunately, she landed right in the middle of Callum's fishing boat. Therefore, this incident meant that Morag was killed by Callum's fishing boat. If it had not been for that fishing boat, Morag would be alive. However, he said, Callum had moored his fishing boat and anchored it in her normal place with all precautions. No fisherman can be realistically expected to anticipate a cow flying from the heavens to land into his boat. And it is also quite clear that the reason his boat is now unusable is because a cow the aforementioned Morag landed into it and has made a huge unrepairable cow-shaped hole. Therefore, Donald needs compensation, and so does Callum, for they have both lost in this incident. And the clan chief looks at the storyteller. This is why I gave you the job. You are a wise man indeed. So I am, your conclusion then, he says to the storyteller, is that both men have been aggrieved, and therefore Donald must compensate Callum, and Callum must compensate Donald. What an excellent decision. No, said the storyteller. I am not finished. After establishing that both men are aggrieved, I went to have a look at the location of this incident. Morag the cow fell over the cliff. If the cliff had not been there, Morag would not have fallen over it into Callum's boat. And so Morag would be alive and Callum's boat would still be floating. The cliff is the key to finding out who is responsible for this. It is the cliff that is the ultimate culprit. And then the storyteller turned to the landlord and he said, you are clearing people from the land because you say that you own all the land. And if you own all the land, then you own that cliff. And therefore the responsibility to compensate both Donald and Callum resides on you, the chief, the owner of the cliff. What could the chief do? He had publicly said he would enforce the storyteller's decision, so the clan chief had to pay compensation to Donald and had to pay compensation to Callum. And the storyteller lost his job, but also he had done his job. That's my story. Very traditional story.
Thank you, Tim. What a great story.
I can tell you why I like that story.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
I was a few years ago. I was invited with a piper friend of mine to be the bard of some local important someone who thinks they were important, and I kind of accepted it really because it was a really good meal, and I told that story, and it was very well received by the audience.
But he didn't invite you next year.
He's never invited me back. I lost my job.
The storyteller tells the truth and he loses his job. He's just going around there trying to figure out what to do. Oh my, yeah. Cows. I love when you started it with all this, because of course I thought that the cow, the moira, was a woman, a wife, you know, and comfort and give him warmth and everything. So it was like a cow. There's something about this that when I was a child, I lived very close to Copenhagen, so we didn't have any farming around our place. But my uncle had a farm, and I went there for summer vacations. And I remember just sitting there with these calves. One of the best thing I knew was to sit in there with the calves and get friendly with them. You know, you kind of give them names, and I was just kids of 8, 9, 10 years old, so I gave them all names, and I was the one that should take care of the food for them and everything. So I went in there and I sat there with these small calves, and they came, and that's when they come with the heads and then the tongue into it. Now, don't do that, but the tongue goes in again, and that relationship was something I really enjoyed it. I could spend hours in there and do nothing. I was just giving them food, water. Oh, you need water. And then I went out there, and my aunt, of course, thought it was brilliant that I was just spending a lot of time in there, so I didn't have to bother her with all kind of questions. Like when you have all these kids around, you know that there's a lot of activities going on, so it's good to have a cow, just let them stay for a while. But do you know the Nordic what happens first in the Nordic creation of the world? It's actually a cow called Audhumbla, and Audhumbla is a massive cow. It stretches from the cold to the heat, and it is formed out of droplets, and the cow gives milk, and there's 4 others there, and there's a big giant, and he's lying there. Audhumbla is giving milk to Ymer, and he's just lying there with a big happy smile, and he is huge. I tell you, he's huge. He's more or less as big as the whole universe. So that cow really has to do something, and that cow licks the ice cubes, the 2 ice cubes there, and she just licks it with her tongue, and it forms the first man god. Inside that ice cube is the first living creature. This first creature is Ymer, and he's just huge and big and do nothing. He's just lying there drinking, and all these giants are born from him. But it's kind of the first conscious being is the man god created by this cow licking. And I made a picture of it. I can show you a little picture here. I actually have to. This is, you see, that's a giant with a lot of giants on it. That's Ymer.
Like Borag, I'd say.
Yeah, it could be the cow. It's true. And here we have the cow.
Fabulous.
At Himmler. So cows. I have them around here. Thank you so much for the story. So now I prepared something for you, Tim. So if you will sit back or just sit where you are and listen to this little story. So it's about the 7 stars. We call them Sustjan in where I come from in Denmark. And there's a lot of magic around these 7 stars. The Greeks called them the Pleiades, and there's like Orion chasing the youngest one every night. But my story starts with a man who had 6 sons. None of them got names. So when he called out for number 1, he just said number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. And they grew up to become nice young men. And then he said, now it's time for you to go out there in the world, and you should learn something that I would be proud of. You know, go out and find a trade, do something, crafts, learn something, go out there. 2 years, you will come back. And so they went off, and they came back after 2 years, and then he turned to the number 1 and said, number 1, the eldest, what have you learned? Well, Father, I've learned to build ships. I can build them faster and better than anyone in the whole wide world. That's a good trade. That's not bad. And then he looked at the second, number 2, and said, what have you learned? Well, I can sail the ship. You can give me a storm, you can give me stones or rocks and very dangerous seas that have oceans to cross. I'll do it. faster than anyone in the world. Not bad. What about you, number 3? What have you learned? I learned to listen. I can hear everything there is in the whole wide world. The neighbors are fighting, everything. It's quite hard actually, but I got used to it. So, number 4, what did you learn then? Well, I'm a climber. I can climb every mountain in the world. It's Ben Nevis, Scotland's highest. Within half an hour, I'm up the top and back again, and all of the mountains in the whole wide world, I've climbed them all. Well, that's not bad. And then number 5, what did you learn? He was already there with just showing his rifle, and he shot right there and hit a little whatever it was, but always in hard. He always hit it right in hard. It was fast, slow, big, small, right in the heart. Yeah, not bad. And then he turned to number 6, the youngest one. You know how it is with fathers and youngest one, right? There's sort of a soft spot there. So he said, number 6, what did you learn? And the youngest one smiled and said, I learned to steal, father, and I've become a master thief. What? Said the father. What have you learned? A thief, not in my house. Get out of my house. And you the rest of you can go with him. And now they were standing outside the house, didn't know really what to do. So they went up close to the castle in the town there. And they went in down, there was a little tavern there, a little pub. They had some beer and it was drinking the beer, but they could see that everybody was crying. Everybody was so sad. When she came with the beer, they were crying into the beer. What's wrong with you? Why are you all crying? What's the matter? Well, a big troll, a large, huge, big troll, fast as that, had taken the princess, and she's somewhere in the ocean. We don't know where she is, but she's gone. And we love that princess. We really loved her. Yeah, you know what happened? Number 1 had got up and started building the ship. Number 3, the one with the ears, was just going like, oh, I think I know where it is. I can hear her. I can hear him. Oh, and then after a while, the ship was built. It was a beautiful ship and really was a good ship. So of course, number 2, who could step up there and stood there with the steering wheel, and it was great. It was a storm, there was rocks, it didn't matter, he was so good at it, and the ship was fantastic. So they came out in the open sea and he was still listening, and then they saw an island with a glass mountain. Nobody could ever have a chance to get up there, but well, there was one of the brothers stepped out of the boat, climbed up the glass mountain, looked, and then back to and took the one that could steal, and up into the glass mountain. How he did that, I have no idea, but he stole the princess. It's an easy thing for a master thief, and down into the boat, and then and the guy who was listening said, the troll is awake now. He's looking for her, and now he's coming. He didn't have to say that, because out of that glass mountain came the biggest, largest, ugliest, badly smellest troll that you... I mean, Tim, come on, imagine. It was bad. It was really bad. And he was screaming out loud, come back with my princess! And he would have ripped that boat apart if it wasn't... Well, the princess said, oh, the troll has one little... I mean, it's like this. It's so small, you can hardly see it just by his heart. Where he's not totally... I mean, you can hit him with anything, but not that little spot. If you hit him there, he will die. And of course, one of the brothers sat down, aimed, and shot him right in the heart. And that troll, what we say in Denmark is, he became flint stone, because you can far I flint means that you go into the flint stone. If you are angry, you go far I flint. And that troll became all the flintstone you find on the beaches around in the world. That's from him. Yeah, you don't know, it's true. But when they came back to the castle, you know, she was going to who was the most important part of the story? And they were all beautiful boys. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. Oh my goodness God! The one that built the ship, the one that sailed the ship, him that listened so well. What about him that climbed? What about him that stole her? And the one that shot? Each one of them were important for the story, right? So she was crying, and all 6 was crying, and up in the heaven God was sitting and, no, it's not going to work for me. This is not going to work for me. If she's going to pick one of these, the red, and she doesn't even know who to pick. No, what's going to happen? I'm going to transform them. I'm going to change them. I'm going to do like this and make them into stars. So he placed the 7 into stars, and every night, not in the summertime, but in the autumn and in the winter time, you'll see 7 stars very closely together. They're always together. That he decided that they can be together for the rest of time. But one of them you can hardly see. That's of course the thief. And one of them is shining brighter than the other. That of course is the princess. So that's my story for you.
Oh, love that. What's the title of the story? Is there a title?
Oh, it's a story that's called the 7 Stars. 7 Stars. I have heard it, I think, once or twice, but it's a story that I found in the there's this man called Everton Christensen who walked around in the very poor area of Denmark, in the middle of Jutland. 1850, 1870, 1890, around in the 19th century, late 19th century, he was walking around there, and he's collected stories upon stories upon stories, and they're very like, you know, he was trying to write them down as he was told them.
Ah, so I love it. It's got so much in it as well. I'm doing a wee project just now for a school, working with online at the moment, with particularly boys who are kind of disengaged from learning, and I just see in that story a lot of message about different skills, and you know, how what may be perceived to be a negative thing could become a really positive thing, and there's lots to kind of working on that. Beautiful, a lovely state. I'll use it, but I'll credit you.
That's fine. That's good. And credit Evil.
Lovely story. It reminds me a little bit. That kind of like what popped into my head when you were telling that story was a story I've been kind of working on with the kids just now. That idea of the quest of the boys growing up, and their job is to go out and kind of find a skill, or find their find their fate. And that there's a very, very old fairy tale that you probably know, that's kind of have Irish origins, and it's a very old Scottish story. We know this story was told to James V, who lived in the 16th century, and it was a bedtime story for him, and it's about the Red Ettin. And have you heard about the Red Ettin? The Red Ettin was a kind of giant, 3-headed giant, and he was called the Red Ettin because he would kind of munch on meat, and his clothes kind of became kind of red stained. And James V loved this. I mean, this was one of his favourite bedtime stories. But his daughter, when she was wee, she was also told this story. Right? She was horrified by it. She didn't like it at all. And when she was about 4.5, she came running through one morning going, ah, and she'd seen her mother in the next room, and she said, the red Etin is with my mother. My mother's going to get eaten by the red Etin. And when the servants went through to see it, it obviously wasn't the three-headed red Etin. It was the cardinal who had the red cloak. And basically, it's a long story, but basically there are two poor families. They both have widows, and in one house there are two sons, and in the other house there's one son. And the oldest of the two brothers sets off on this quest, and he gives his younger brother a knife, and he says, as long as this knife is shining, you know I'm okay. But when the knife dulls, then I'm in trouble. And so this first brother sets off, and along the way things happen. A big message in the story is that he takes all the cake. His mother makes him a cake, but he doesn't share it with his mother. He takes it all. And then along the way, there's an old woman who comments on how delicious the cake looks, but he doesn't share it. He keeps it to himself. And along the way, he meets character. He meets a shepherd, he meets a goat herd, and he meets a swine herd. And he's told that the red Etin, this three-headed monster, has stolen all these animals. And he ends up in the castle of the red Etin. And it's very similar to the tale of Jack and Beanstalk. And the red Etin, well, he's got 3 heads. So he's got 6 ears. And he's got 3 noses. So when the young lad is hiding in the kitchen and the red Etin comes in, he can hear the heartbeat, because of his ears. And he can smell the fear, And so the young lad gets found out, and he gets turned into stone because the red Etin doesn't have a freezer. So he turns his victims into stone and puts them in the cellar to eat later on. Well, the long and short of it is, so the younger brother sees the knife is now dim and tries to find his brother, and he also gets put in the cellar as a stone statue. So their neighbour, the young lad who's their neighbour and friend, he sets off, but he gives his mother half the cake, and along the way he meets an old woman who comments on how delicious the cake is, and this time he shares it with her. And after sharing his cake, she says, there's 3 things you need to know. And she tells him 3 things he needs to know. And when he gets to the red Etin's castle, the red Etin, before turning him into stone, says, if you can guess my 3 riddles, that is the only way. And he doesn't believe anyone can guess his 3 riddles. And of course, the 3 things that the old woman has told him are the 3 answers to the riddles. And when he gets the riddles, the red Etin is so angry that this lad is able to cut the 3 heads off. And then he goes down into the cellar, and he's able to use a wand that the old woman, who was a fairy, and turns his friends back into human form. And guess what? There are other statues down there. And guess what? One of them is a princess, the daughter of the king. And so he ends up marrying her. So I mean that's a very short, but the red Etin tale is quite gory and good fun. Your story was lovely and had lots in it. But that genre of going out on a quest and having skills, and his skills that he learned was to solve riddles.
Alice Fernbank, that's in the kitchen here, my wife, tells the story of an Irish story of 2 sisters, 3 sisters, I think there is, and a dead man, and it's also about a cake. You know, half the cake for blessing, half and it's like whenever there's this, you have to go, you have to go, you have to leave, you have to travel in a story, then it's very good to look around and equip yourself. Are you ready? Are you ready for? And one of the things that a lot of stories is about is that the most important thing to be ready is here. It's like of what your mind said. How do you actually go out in the world and receive it? Are you already fighting the world before you step out into it? Then it comes to you with 3 heads, or I love 6 ears, Tim. You got these details. It's clear. Of course, it has 6 ears, and you can hear things. Great. Thank you so much, Tim. It's been a joyful 40 minutes here.
Yes,
I like
I've
that.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't. There's no editing, and there's one. You just have it online in about an hour or so. So thank you so much, and take good
I,
care.
I, I absolutely hate watching myself.
Okay, so don't do it.
Like, I
Don't do
can't
it.
do it.
Yeah, let other people do that then. Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah, but and the other thing is, you see all the things that you've got, like, oh, and then because when it's live, you don't even remember, but every little nuance is. So I find it quite hard to watch. I don't know. This is very new to me, but thank you. It's been a real joy. It's been nice spending some time with you.
yeah, it's nice. It's nice. Yeah, take good care, Tim. Okay, bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.